something that we're working on right now to kind of like help people understand like the journey of like how you got to where you're at, or a Ronch or Smitty, me, other people in the room, is we built kind of this graphic. And this graphic basically has different stages of where we think most people kind of fit. And I wanted to show it to you because I wanted to ask you a couple things about it.
Okay. This should be cool.
So we have this trader journey graphic, right? So stage 1 is Herb Life. This will be fun. It'll be easy, right? Never is. All right. Then you have the grind, trying to be there, trying to work towards it. It's usually when you blow accounts. Then you start to get a little profit, right? So stage 3 is some hope. Then moving on to get like working profitability, the mind fuck of, hey, wow, I can actually do this. And then you have a little doubt. And then of course you keep going. And then equilibrium, which is where I'd probably put like you and Ronch and everyone is, hey, I've been in this game long enough. So I'm curious, Jay, when you look at something like this, you know, what stage of this like sticks out to you of where you say, hey, I was in this stage the longest, and here's like not an aha moment, but maybe that's what it is, or I had to get past this hump, or even a good story about one of these stages that you've kind of been in?
Yeah, again, it kind of, you know, I don't know exactly what point was what throughout my career. Because when I got into, and you know, this is not, I don't feel great about saying it, but Smitty, you might be able to relate a little. When I got into this game, I was risking client money initially. So a lot of the learning process wasn't my personal money at risk. You understand? I didn't have much money to lose at the time. So, you know, I went through the process. I was a cold caller, making the $200 a week, pounding the phone. Then I became a broker. Then I had to build a book. So once obviously that the grind and the frustration for me was kind of, that was all that. Passing the Series 7. Then, you know, you feel like $1 million. I'm all suited up. I'm going to work every day. You know, I feel like this big player. You know, now I'm licensed, but I still have no clients. I got to build a book. You know what I mean? I'm watching the market go up and down, and I hardly have anything to trade it with. So, you know, that's kind of the frustrating part for me initially, kind of the grind in a sense, was that stage that no matter what, I had to work more focused on getting accounts and clients than figuring out the market, right? So for me, that was the grind. And then once I got enough clientele and some of that money under management, that's when I kind of took a dive into the markets and trying to get a feel for things to see where I stand in regards to, you know, emotionally, systematically. Do I have a philosophy that works? And that was kind of the next stage after my grind. So after I built that clientele with their money, risking their money, that's where I kind of got a feel for the markets and a better feel for the market. So the lessons I learned from losing money, I was fortunate enough that it wasn't me blowing myself up. You understand? It was clients losing money. And I don't know if that's better or worse, because you have to deal with clients, the phone calls, you know what I mean? Why did we buy that piece of shit and all that? So I don't know if that's any better.
Got to justify it all versus if you only have to justify it to yourself. Now you have to justify it to other people.
Yeah, there's no worse feeling. Or even just underperforming and coming in the morning and your sales assistant telling you about 8 cats, clients moving out, going somewhere else, you know, that whole process. So, and going back quickly to Smitty's point earlier, where you have to chase for performance, I mean, that happened to me. I was in cash because I didn't like the market, right? And the market's going high. I didn't care less. I wasn't comfortable in the market, but the longer I stayed in cash, the more 8 cats. Clients were going to other brokers that were investing their money, right? So going to your point, Smitty, it was better off I invested the money and lost than sat in cash and watched the market went on. Right? So going back to this chart, the grind part for me had a lot to do with clients than my personal money. And then once I learned enough and made enough mistakes, that's when, and obviously, you know, I was into my career at that point, that's where I would place my money alongside client money. So now I was playing with my money alongside client money. You understand? So again, it kind of shortened the learning curve in a costly manner to my finances, right? My account. Like people, I don't know if they whether they believe me or not, but I never blew up a personal account. Like I never, knock on wood, I never blew up a personal account. Now, again, there's an asterisk next to that statement, because when I probably would have blown up accounts, I wasn't trading my money. I was trading client. You understand? So a lot of the mistakes I corrected was not only what I've done for clients, but what I would see other brokers doing for clients, blowing up on margin, shorting in bull markets, right? You see, I'm a long only player right now. Why do you think I'm long only? You don't think I want action on the short side? You know, I just, from the environment I was in, I saw so many fucking players blow up on the short side that it scarred me so much that I can't even think about putting money on the short side. It's not worth it. Even if you tell me just to trade, short scalper trading, it's not worth dipping my beak on the short side from what I've seen happen to people. You understand? Like, a quick example, and you've heard me say this. I would used to go around the whole brokerage firm. It'd be full of brokers, right? And I used to ask them, if you didn't short at all, what would your P&L, what would your client P&L look like? You know what I mean? All the losses in the long run, they all came on the short side. All of them. All the big losses. You know, that and margin were the two, they were Satan. Right? That's where everybody blew up. They were either levered or they were short or both. You know what I mean? So right. these things, you know, it quickened the learning curve for me as far as trading. So then when I got to a point where I didn't want to deal with the clients anymore, and I didn't want to deal with the have-tos, kind of to Smitty's point where I had to chase when I didn't want to, that's when I walked away, when I felt comfortable enough to trade my own money. And I learned a lot from the mistakes I made for clients, for myself over the years, you know? But the big thing for me was, the big pivot point was basically, and I know it like it, I talked about it in the past. My biggest problem was I got to a point where I was long only, and in a bull trend, in a bull market, I can make just as much money as anybody else out there. I was convinced. It really came down to luck whether you made more money than me, right? Playing the long side, because I wasn't going short, you know, and I was just going long, and I learned enough to pick the right spots and to learn all those other intricate details where I was convinced I can make money in an uptrend just as much as anybody else. My big problem was I would give it all back every fucking time that bull trend topped out. The first drawdown, not only would I give back all my profits from that whole bull trend, and then some. And it was the most frustrating thing in the world, because I racked my brain and I did all that to master the long side in an uptrend, only for one down leg, the start of a correction, to give it all back, you know? So that's what kind of, to me, was the big thing I had to work on. And that's where sentiment, positioning, this type of stuff came in to kind of get me out of the way from getting caught with a loaded basket into highs and getting, you know, lit up. So that was kind of like, there's hope. I was more of a scratch player in a sense, right? Where I would make money on the upside and then get caught. But then once sentiment positioning came into the mix and fine-tuned when I should get out of the way and stuff like that, that's when, you know, I was convinced now I can be a profitable player overall. And that was that there's hope stage for me.
That's awesome. And out of all of this too, like when you see this, Jay, right? Like, you know, most people are going to be caught in like stages 1, 2, and 3, right? Once you get past 3 and you get into like the working of profitability, right? Again, it's still a big grind, but you've learned enough from your mistakes. The hardest part is actually getting to that point, at least in my opinion, right? Because you have to deal with the emotions of losing money, right? Always.
Yeah.
So like if you're talking to someone who's in this game now, right, and they're stuck in one of these 3 stages, like what's one piece of advice you have for them?
I think the biggest thing I thought was I think the most ridiculous thing that I would see, and I would hate to see it, was when players become scratch players, when they would get frustrated the most and then give up and walk away. And I used to say to them, you don't realize you're there now. You understand? Right. You're a scratch player. A couple of little changes here and there, and now that scratch player goes from scratch player to profitable trader. Okay. The point is you're not blowing yourself up. You understand? You're right on that line. You're right there. So you just got to figure out what's preventing you from becoming a profitable, consistent, profitable player from that scratch, as opposed to why you're blowing yourself up, which is a bigger problem, right? There's a lot of problems behind that. So I think anybody out there who's kind of in that scratch trader arena, to avoid getting frustrated and realize that you're closer than you think you are, and to keep at it. You know what I mean? Don't throw in the towel there. Because I think the toughest part is kind of behind you now. Not to say that you're going to figure it out immediately, and you're going to be snap of a finger consistent trader after that. But sometimes you can get lucky and find something like you're saying, gamma. For me, it was sentiment positioning that really, changed it for me from being scratched to consistently profitable and stuff like that. So there's no pinpoint thing. There's no timetable. Sometimes you get lucky, it happens sooner. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But if you're on that island, scratch island, you're closer than you think, and you got to stick with it.
Love it. Love it. That's great advice, Jay. Always great advice. So much wisdom from the godfather of the Steamroom. That's how it always goes.